The family has lived at Ripley Castle for 700 years. It is on the edge of the village, and this creates a much closer relationship between castle and village, in that the village is very much designed architecturally around a lot of the architectural features that are found on the castle. So you have the same Gothic arched windows appear in the village as you find in the castle, and some of the arrowhole windows and things like that. So you can see the correlation of the two, which is very nice. And it also means that when you come to Ripley, you're not just seeing the castle and gardens, you can also stroll into the village and see some of the lovely shops there. The delicatessen, Ripley's world famous ice creams are hugely popular. There's an art gallery and all sorts of things. So it makes a very nice day out. One of the great features of Ripley Castle are the gardens, because they're a fantastic backcloth for the castle. You've got the castle with all its history, and then you come into what is a genuinely historical walled garden. There is 4.5 acres of walled garden here, and they've always been a great feature of the castle. And when people think of Ripley Castle, they tend to think of the castle but not the gardens, and then they're astonished when they come in here and see what we've actually achieved in the last 30 years. This is a garden that will stand on its own anywhere, and we have Sir John Ingleby to thank for that, because he had the vision in the 1780s, and he was a fanatical gardener who, everywhere he travelled in Europe, he collected seeds and sent them back to Ripley for the gardeners to plant. And some of those seeds, particularly the apple trees, are growing today.
The house really opened for the first time when Thomas's father took a grant, in fact, to repair the panelling on this room. It had Death Watch beetle. And in those days, you know, the tickets were sold from a trestle table under the gatehouse, and you were lucky if kind of 1,000 people came in, you know, in a week, and you made about a dozen scones and a couple of cakes, and, you know, our cleaners used to serve them. And then Thomas and I have been married about 25 years, we've been together about 30. And the difference now, where we have 2 or 3 outlets for catering and shops, and, you know, we employ 100 people, and, you know, a good half of our business is dependent on us having tourism not only into the castle but into the village, and caring for that tourism, making sure people can find whatever kind of meal they want. And I think it's very important. I also think it's very important for heritage. There's no point us having a house this old with so much history and not, you know, sharing it and bringing it to life for other people.
Well, the lovely thing about having 700 years of ancestors is that you find them in all shapes, sizes and varieties. And it almost seems to work in alternate generations. You have a black sheep followed by a white sheep. And of course, from a historical viewpoint, the white sheep are rather boring because they were very virtuous and godly and righteous and actually did very little. Whereas the black sheep were terrible people who conspired and you know, gambled and womanized and everything like that. So historically, they're much more colourful. Over the years, we've had a succession of both, really. We've had everything from Francis Ingleby, who was a Roman Catholic priest during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, who was ordained in Reims in northern France and brought into the country by boat overnight, landed secretly on the east coast, and then ministered to the Catholic adherents, the recusants throughout the north of England, and was very much aided and abetted by his brother David, who was the Scarlet Pimpernel of the Northern Catholics, and used to meet all the priests over at Whitby, smuggle them into safe houses throughout the north of England, and try and get them from A to B unmolested or unarrested by the Queen.
At the moment we're standing in one of my favourite rooms in the castle, which is the Knight's Chamber, which is a beautifully panelled room, but the nicest thing about this room is one of the secrets that it holds. During the Reformation, obviously, whilst there were Catholics and Protestants and there were civil wars, it became awfully useful to have somewhere to hide. And the priest's hole was built originally, we think, to hide Francis Ingleby while the family were still Catholics. But we also believe that William Ingleby hid in it during the Battle of Marston Moor, when Sir Oliver Cromwell came to the castle and shot his troops against the castle gatehouse. And this was discovered when we were restoring this panelling. And it's literally, we believe there were 2 originally, but it's literally, I can't see our current vicar, Stephen Brown, hopping in here actually. We've never actually asked him to, perhaps I will. But you literally could sit in there for days. and you use cloth to block up all the gaps, and there's a little ledge for your candle and your prayer book and a fresh air hole, and this little hole here could save your life. And in fact, Francis Ingleby, who we know hid in it at least once, was in fact caught and hung, drawn and quartered, which is just the most revolting death, at York. And we went many years ago to Rome, where he was beatified by the then Pope, and Basil Hume represented us, and there is a picture of the blessed Francis Ingleby. It's the nearest the Inglebys are going to get to a sainthood, quite frankly.
And on the other side then we have Sir William Ingleby, whose main claim to fame is that 9 of the 11 main protagonists of the Guy Fawkes gunpowder plot were either related to him or very closely associated with him, and was arrested along with his son, charged with treason, and tried in York and cleared on the 3rd day of the trial, when all the chief prosecution witnesses suddenly changed their stories and said what a lovely man he was. And the 3rd charge was that of bribing witnesses, so we've always felt that perhaps he didn't bribe the witnesses sufficiently early to escape the charges altogether. But they managed to scuttle away back under their stone again. And then they were very strong adherents of the king during the Civil War. In fact, the family's main achievement for many years was to have this remarkable tradition of supporting the losing side years before anyone else realised that there were 2 sides to an argument. An incredible story during the Civil War of Trooper Jane Ingleby, Sir William's sister at the time. Cromwell turned up here after the Battle of Marston Moor and demanded accommodation overnight. And Sir William had to leap upstairs into a secret priest's hiding place to disappear from view altogether. Cromwell was looked after by his sister Jane, who met him at the gatehouse with 2 pistols tucked in her apron strings, and at first flatly refused to allow him anywhere near the castle, saying she'd defend it against him and all comers for as long as it took. Thankfully they reached a compromise, which was that Cromwell was allowed to spend the night in the castle library, but Trooper Jane sat guard over him all night with her 2 pistols, making sure that he didn't search the house for her brother, and also making sure that he behaved himself. And Cromwell was absolutely stunned, because there he was, having just won the greatest military victory of his career, being held at gunpoint by a woman. And you could hardly race outside the next morning and say, "You'll never guess what happened to me last night, lads." Yeah, he must have been absolutely humiliated by that treatment, but probably too tired to do anything about it after the battle, luckily.
The thing about being in a house as long as we have, and all the artefacts and all the family, it's like any family home, you keep bits that are relevant to you. I found a ring in the back of a drawer, a really solid gold ring. It's pre-gold mark. You know, when I took it to jewellery experts, they believe it's probably the ring that William wore at the Battle of Marston Moor, because in those days everybody wore a signet ring. It was the only way that your word was believed. You know, you signed all your documents and stuck your signet ring on. So, you know, I think that because we live here, we tend to take it for granted. It isn't until you trot around on a tour and you kind of listen, you think, actually, they are holding a piece of armour that was, you know, made to measure, you know, 200 years ago, or, you know, actually, that is, you know, a priest's hold that saved somebody's life. So I think, you know, history shouldn't just be about books. You have to actually believe it. And funny enough, we've taken objects on tour with us to America and Australia, and we've got objects in the castle, including a wine cooler that's up in here, that's older than America and Australia. And, you know, they can't get that. They just can't get that English history is so old, and that you can be holding something that is older than another country.
Ripley is a fabulous day out for the whole family. There is something here that will appeal to literally everyone, from the youngest of the children, who will enjoy the play trail at the top of the gardens, and just running the freedom of the park. Acres and acres of grass there for them to just run around and enjoy. And you can bring a picnic, and yeah, they'll enjoy that too. And for the parents, to look around the gardens if you're into gardening, and for the whole family again, a tour of the castle. And we do special children's tours during the summer months, particularly weekends, when we focus the tour particularly around the children. The grown-ups love it too, but the children will get a tremendous kick from that tour.